What I'd like to do next is introduce our special guest this morning. And, one of the positives in this lovely world of pandemics is that we can have friends from all across the country joining us. So we have friends from the national office. We have friends from Georgia joining us. So I'm really, really pleased to welcome today Ashley Dabbraccio, who is the NHD. Did I get that right, Ashley?
Dabbraccio.
Dabbraccio, I'm sorry.
You're fine.
Ashley is our NHD program assistant for the National History Day office. She is also, I'm pleased to say, a Connecticut native. And this year, Ashley, if you've read the theme book, she wrote this year's theme narrative. And we're so pleased to have her here to be the expert talking on this year's theme of communication in history, the key to understanding. Before joining the national office, Ashley worked as the West Tennessee History Day Assistant District Coordinator. So we're really glad to have you with us. And Ashley, what I'm going to do right now is try to figure out how to share my screen.
Okay.
And then we can get started.
Sounds good.
All righty. And if everyone can bear with me for a second so I can get the correct screen up. Technology, right? All righty. Ashley and Cindy, can you see?
I can.
Our, let's see.
Try hitting F5, Rebecca, and see if that works.
F5?
Yeah, see if it will trigger on your computer. It should be under, if you go to view. And then you hit present, it should pop up.
Yes, thank you.
No problem.
Okay, it's teamwork, right?
Exactly.
Okay, let me get to the right slide. And Ashley, if you just want to let me know when it's time for the next one.
Will do. All right. So as Rebecca said, I'm Ashley Dabbraccio, and I'm the program assistant here at National History Day. And for those of you listening, I know most of you are NHD teachers, but I am going to give you my 30-second elevator speech of what is National History Day really quickly, in case you want to show this to anyone, if you're trying to inspire them to join the program, or if you know of someone who is interested in learning more. So NHD is, of course, an international program that encourages social studies and history education for students in grades 6 through 12. And we do that through project-based learning and by encouraging kids to create projects that have historical arguments and do actual research. So you can go ahead and flip to the next screen, Rebecca. We do this through our 5 categories, our first one being the most traditional of them, and that's the paper category, in which they can work on an individual paper by themselves if they feel so inclined. You can go ahead and switch, Rebecca. All right, and then our other more traditional one is exhibits. This one works kind of like a science fair. So if you've ever seen a science fair exhibit, this is that. But it's structured around history instead of science. Additionally, if you have students working in the exhibits category and they're questioning about what's going on for 2021, tell them to head over to nhd.org/categories. They're going to find a short video and all of the guides that they need to get them set up for whether or not your exhibit and your contest are virtual or physical.
And we're going to talk about that later today.
That's fantastic. All right, documentaries. So documentaries are for your inspiring filmmakers or anyone who just really wants to be Ken Burns for the day. And this is actually my favorite category, but don't tell anyone. All right, our next category is websites. So if you've got some students who are fans of IT or want to work in website development in the future, this is the category for them. They will use our NHD Web Central builder in order to build their websites from the ground up, and they will do this using HTML or the traditional drag and drop options, but it gives them a lot of creativity in website building. And of course, performances. This is for our drama kids or anyone who's intrigued by the performing arts. And again, this is one that's faced some challenges because of 2020. But if you have questions about what's going on in 2021, I'm sure Rebecca will be bringing it up later, but also you can head on over to nhd.org/categories under the performances section to see what we're doing for that to help with 2021 and make sure our performance kids have a voice in that 2021 contest. All right, so we're going to move forward. If you haven't already heard, the 2021 theme is communication in history, the key to understanding. So I'm just going to walk you through a couple of different ways that students might think about tackling that idea of communication and what it helps us to understand about history. You can go ahead and flip. All right, so I know we have a lot of CT teachers out there, but for those of you who aren't, you might get a little knowledge about CT history. Since I am a Connecticut native, I decided to focus these all on sources that you can actually find in Connecticut archives. So,
And Ashley, I just have to say that I love the fact that we've chosen some of these in the theme workshop that we're doing. So
that's
great
great.
minds think alike.
Wonderful. All right, so what is communication? Well, we can look at communication from several different ways, and some of them are easy to identify and others aren't. So I'm going to start out with some more obvious ones and then go into communication in ways you might not have thought of or your students might not think about. So the first one, of course, is probably the easiest, right? Communication is spoken. And so students might decide to focus on speeches or debates where things are spoken. Like, for instance, Frederick Douglass gave speeches on abolition to encourage people to support abolition in the 1830s and 1840s and later on, but he did so in Connecticut, in Hartford at Allen Hall. And he did this to talk not only about his trials, but to later encourage for changes, right? So this one focused on the life of John Brown. Of course, communication is also written. This is a letter from the P.T. Barnum collection that's available at the Connecticut Digital Archives. So Barnum was actually a huge proponent of temperance. He was a big supporter of it, and he gave speeches and he wrote letters all supporting the abolishment of the sale of alcohol in the United States. And this letter is actually written by one of his fans, an S.M. Perkins, showing her support for Barnum and for his support of the temperance movement. So that's one way that we see communication being exchanged and written about. And of course, communication is heard and received. So, fun fact, Connecticut actually boasts the first commercial telephone exchange to ever happen in the US. And this is the Boardman Building in New Haven, Connecticut, where that first telephone exchange was. And so this is the first time we see commercial telephone exchanges happening in the United States and what that meant for how fast we could connect to other people in the US and across the world. You can go ahead and flip. All right, so communication also happens in gatherings. And what you'll see here is actually a suffrage parade that happened in Litchfield, Connecticut in 1911. So I know suffrage is going to be a big topic this year. And I think one of the ways to really make a project unique when it comes to suffrage is to think specifically about how suffrage was handled in your state. And so Connecticut had actually a large suffrage association that women were supported of, and they did a ton of parades. And this is just a focus of one. And in the digital archive, all of these sources not only showcase the pictures of parades had by Connecticut suffragists, but it also, in a lot of cases, lists the names and who appeared at those parades if they could identify them. And so students can start to think about, how do parades really help us to promote communication or to promote a cause like suffrage or abolition or voting rights, right? No matter what they're interested in, how do gatherings help communication to spread? And then, of course, the next one, oh, if you can flip back. Thanks, Rebecca. So the next one is thinking about communication as a part of government and civics. So in this case, I focused on an influenza poster from the Connecticut State Council of Defense. So in this one, they're encouraging people to do things like wash their hands, right? Be careful about what surface they contaminated, because we did have a pandemic before this one, right? And this one was to stop the spread of influenza. So how does the government communicate with the people in its state to promote safety or other public service announcements? And then, of course, we have political communication, right? We are in an election year, and I know that's probably a focus, especially if some of you teach gov, or if you're teaching, right, anything to do with politics. This is a specific political protest that happened in Connecticut in the year 1969. It was actually targeted at General Electric, which used to operate out of the state. And the line was to protest the racial policies that were occurring at General Electric. So their slogan was "Smash racism, smash GE." So students might be interested in how do we use politics to communicate what we want or what we hope to change. All right, now you can go ahead and flip. All right, so another key component that we think about is language, right? We communicate in English, or if we're from a bilingual household, we may communicate in other languages as well. So, but I like to flip this one on its head, right? Language isn't just spoken. And Hartford actually boasts the first deaf school in the United States. And this is an original alphabet that comes out of that deaf school, right? That shows American Sign Language, which is also a language. So what do we do if language isn't spoken, but rather if we're using sign language to communicate, or if we are using Braille to communicate, right? These are different ways to think about how language affects communication and how it's key in how we communicate with each other. But then, of course, what happens when we miscommunicate with other people? And in another of firsts that Connecticut has, they have the only in US history 4-train pileup. And it is because through a series of miscommunications and people forgetting to notify the various trains on the tracks, 4 trains smash into each other and other cars, causing one of the deadliest train crashes in US history. And that site happens in Thompson, Connecticut in 1891. Right? So how does miscommunication also lead to NHD projects? What other what other pieces of miscommunication can you think about, not only in Connecticut history, but in US history, or maybe even world history, right? That have caused problems that we've then had to resolve as a part of that miscommunication. And another way to think about this, especially if kids need help with perspective and that idea of, history has multiple sides to a story, is to have them think about two-sided communication. So in this one, I've decided to include the fundamental orders of Connecticut. And this is what the colony of Connecticut is founded on, right? It's our ideas of who gets voting rights, who's allowed to own land in Connecticut. It's a little more liberal than what you see in the Mayflower Compact 19 years earlier, but did everyone agree with something like the Connecticut fundamental orders? Was there pushback against it? What is the response to something like this state order, right? There's always an ebb and flow to communication, and we can't just think about one side of that communication. We need to think about both sides, and sometimes not everybody agrees in that piece of two-sided communication. So it really helps students to see both sides of that story. Now, they don't necessarily have to agree with both sides, but they have to think about both sides and how that communication may cause problems down the line, or how do we resolve those issues of communication if we have 2 sides or 3 sides to every story. All right. So now that I've just thrown a ton of different options at you, I know most of you are working through hybrid or various types of teaching. So how do you start research virtually, especially with students not having access to the things that they would normally have access to in a regular year? And I know a big one on that is libraries. We'll see what's already out there, right? Don't reinvent the wheel. I know how hard you're all working. Don't make it harder for yourself. See what's out there. And if you don't know what's out there, don't be afraid to ask, right? Rebecca may know something, I may know something, right? That we can help you and that you don't have to stretch yourself out to do more. So see and consider what's already out there instead of reinventing the wheel.
Absolutely. And Ashley, I'm going to just jump in for a second. We're going to
Sure.
talk more about this later, but National History Day has been working incredibly hard to have a great amount of material up on their website that you can utilize, including short videos. They've done a wonderful video about this year's theme. We have also added to what we have on our website. We're going to continue to add more. So keep checking back for that. And if you haven't, we do have our History Day blog. I think we're the only affiliate to do that. So we have guest writers to try to share ideas. But I would definitely wholeheartedly agree with Ashley to please reach out to us because we're here to help you. And we know it's a tough year and there's a lot of great material that's been created.
There absolutely has been, and I have to give a lot of props to all of the affiliates across NHD community. They are really just pushing to get all of this information out to you. So thank you, special thank you to them. And don't be afraid to go check out and what other affiliates in the NHD community have for materials, right? Don't think you have to just look at one state's. Go see what everyone else has developed. A lot of times we like to pick and choose from different affiliates because of what's already created. And we know if someone's done it, then we focus on creating something else. So really don't be afraid to get in that Google and see what else everyone is doing. And next, check out the virtual teacher bag. So NHD does a teacher bag every year at the national contest. And we decided last year, which was a good decision, come to think of it, to go green and make it a virtual teacher bag so that more teachers, not just those at the national contest, could have access to it. So I encourage you to go and check that out. It pulls together all of the materials that come from NHD partners like History Channel, NEH, the National Endowment for the Humanities, and from the National Archives, from the Library of Congress. So go over there and check that out. And you can check out that virtual teacher bag at nhd.org/VTB. And I'll put in one of my next slides, I will put up the URL so you can write that down if you need it.
And Ashley sent me a copy of this presentation in PDF, which I can send out to everyone afterwards. So you'll also have that as well.
Perfect. Thank you, Rebecca. All right. Also, this is my PSA for the day. With things the way they are, this year more than ever is the time to utilize your local history. I have just given you 9 different examples of history in and across Connecticut. Now, for those of you who aren't Connecticut teachers, you can do the same thing in your state or in your area, right? Local history is a good way to go this year, especially if you check in with your local archives, your historical societies, and your libraries. Most of them have local history collections that they can help make available to students. So really think about how local history could really help you this year, even if it's not something that kids might normally think about. And one of the ways to do that is to think about how to flip narratives. So I see a lot of projects on Elizabeth Cady Stanton and Susan B. Anthony, and that's not surprising, right? They're 2 of the most kind of major figures in women's suffrage. But Connecticut had its own major figures when it came to suffragists. So think about Isabella Beecher Hooker, Catherine Beach Day, Emily Miller Pearson, or Catherine Martha Hepburn, right? All of these were really important figures in Connecticut suffrage history. So they might be someone that students can do research into, as opposed to trying to get to Susan B. Anthony or Cady Stanton's records, which they might not have access to with things being closed. So really think about how you might flip those narratives to make them a more local story. Also, if you have friends that teach Connecticut state history or New England state history, connect with them, see what topics they can come up with, right? They may know something that students might have never heard about in New England history or in Connecticut history. See what options they can give you, and if they know where sources are housed. All right, the next one, get creative. I know things are crazy right now, and I know things are moving faster than any of us anticipated, but these are my two kind of get creatives that I am borrowed from other teachers I'm working with in a class. One of them came up with the idea of setting up a traveling library with librarians. And that meant she worked with our public library to basically set up a cart in which she gave the various topics that her students were working on to the librarian. And they were able to pull books that kids would need and set up drive-by pickups so that students could pick up the books that they needed and not have to worry about it, even if their libraries were closed or only doing curbside pickup. So don't be afraid to reach out to your school librarians or your local public library librarians and see what can be done. And the other thing is that, and again, I pulled this from another teacher in the class I'm working with. She set up a digital research library, and she did this in her LMS. And what she did was she made the option to start adding in websites that she felt were really good places for students to start. But she also made the option to let students get in there and add to the library themselves. So it's helping them try and figure out what pieces of materials that they needed, but also help other students find what they needed as well. So don't be afraid to set up something like this digital research library or something that's collaborative that will help students along the way. And if it's already there and you've got all the links, you can continue to use it even after we're not in a pandemic. And one of the other ones I would suggest, form new partnerships, right? If you don't have a school librarian right now, which is I know a case for many, reach out to your public library. Work with your civics and government and English teachers. Connect with your local historical societies and archives. They may be closed, but they have people who are still working who may be able to help you. And biggest piece of advice I can give you, don't be afraid to ask for what you need. We may not have it, but we may know someone that does. And if we don't know anyone that has it, maybe it's something we should be considering making or having available to you. So don't be afraid to ask for things that you need.
Absolutely. And with local history, there's the Association for the Study of Connecticut History. They're a great resource to go to ask, hey, do you know a historian who works in this, in this topic area? So absolutely don't be afraid to ask any of us for help.
Actually, before you move forward, there was a question about the virtual teacher bag.
Sure.
Wanting to know,
And Cindy, we're having a little trouble hearing you.
so the virtual teacher bag is for 2020. Will materials for 2021 be added into that bag?
Yes, Shannon, so yes, so the virtual teacher bag will be 2020 until the 2021 contest in June. So it will link to anything that's communication and history right now until we announce that 2022 theme. So it will stay the same, but a lot of the times, most of our organizations have editor rights. So if they are adding something, they may be adding to that folder throughout the year. So they do have that option. So just keep checking back, but we will be reaching out to our partners. We start that around November to see what new materials they created. And so we'll be continuously updating that through 2021. All right. So where to start? Well, Rebecca mentioned them, but it's also a really great place to remind. So thank you, Rebecca, for the plug. NHD is working on short form videos. They're from anywhere from 5 to 8 videos, and they are quick digital research tips or quick NHD tips. So it just depends on what you're looking for. If it's more skills based, we have them. If there are more NHD questions, we have them. Just examples of what's out there. How to use Google Books, how to mine Wikipedia, how to smart search online, right? For NHD quick tips, we have a complete series on annotated bibliographies. So what is an annotated bibliography? How do you write annotations? How do you write a citation? So if your students really struggle with those annotated bibliographies, you might direct them to those really short videos, and they are available on our YouTube as well as on nhd.org/student-resources. And I will get that link to you as well. So I would also encourage you to check out these web pages. If you're looking for topic ideas, go to nhd.org/partner resources. All of our organizations have dedicated NHD pages, and they pull together different topic ideas or different sources for students to take a look at, and they're curated specifically for the annual theme. So all of them will have updated their pages to deal with communication in history and how they see communication in history. The second one on there is that virtual teacher bag link. So if you haven't found it, that's it right there, nhd.org/VTB. I would also encourage you, if you haven't seen them, NHD ran a series of webinars on teaching history virtually, and they are all available for viewing at nhd.org/THV. I would also encourage you to check out the digital archive on DPLA, which is specifically geared towards Connecticut sites. So it pulls together everything that Connecticut has digitized. Of course, the Library of Congress's digital collections are a great place to start. Rebecca also mentioned Chronicling America. If you haven't used Chronicling America in the past, definitely check it out. And of course, ConnecticutHistory.org and the Historical Society, which is chs.org. And all of these are really great places to start for both local history and for different NHD topics on a national level as well.
And Ashley, I'm going to just throw out two more, which we'll talk about later. We have created, Nicole did a great job working on this year's list of Connecticut topics, which is on our Educators Resources page on our History Day website for Connecticut History Day. And then also our friends at Connecticut Explored, the magazine of Connecticut History, have a page that is basically a bank of ideas related to Connecticut history that can be found in their various magazine articles that is on their website for this year's theme.
I would also encourage you, I'm not a huge social media fan, and I know that some of you out there aren't either, but right now it is the best way to stay connected. So if you don't have social media or you don't utilize it, I do encourage you to follow some places like this, including NHD, but also Connecticut Digital Archives, the National Archives, the Library of Congress, Digital Public Library of America, your local libraries and archives. What's really great about following them across any platform, I see this on my LinkedIn platform, I see this on Instagram, I see this on Twitter, right? They're publishing tweets or posts that deal with what they have started to digitize. And so that's the best way to keep up with what people are doing and what they're producing. So I know that I just got alerted this morning on my LinkedIn that apparently Internet Archive just released 10,000 pages worth of historic cookbooks. Now, I don't know what I was doing with those, but if you have kids that are maybe interested in the history of food or the history of cooking, that might be something that interests them, right? But stay connected on your social media, because places like the National Archives and the Library of Congress and your local archives, they're posting on there what they have available digitally and how to access it. And that's the best way to know what's out there, and you'll know as soon as it hits the wire. All right, you can go ahead and flip, Rebecca. All right, so this is the point where I do my shameless plugs. This is where I encourage you to go check a couple of things out, and hopefully some you'll know and some I will hopefully introduce you to. So the first one is, if you haven't downloaded a copy of our theme book or seen the introduction video, it's about 8 minutes long. Rebecca mentioned it earlier in the program. It just kind of walks you through the different ways to look at ideas of communication. Please go over to nhd.org/themebook and you'll find our full-length webinar, our introduction video, our theme book, and our graphic organizers that go with the theme book, and you can download all of that stuff right there on that page.
And if you're one of those folks who greatly loves, for me, I know I like the actual hard copy in my hand, we do have a limited number of those that we can mail out to you.
Exactly. I prefer my hardcover there too, Rebecca. All right, you can go ahead and flip. Next one, Rebecca mentioned this as well. We have a new rule book for 2020, and this is the rule book we will be using for the 2021 contest and moving forward. And what it does is it just updates a couple of rules, and it gives a lot of clarity on things that people have always wondered about. So that idea of what's wide research gets talked about in this new rule book. There's also a video on it if you want to know a little bit more about what's wide research, but you can download your own copy at nhd.org/rulebook. All right. Along with that new rulebook, we have new evaluation forms. And so what they do and what the major change is that they now have text that goes along with those check boxes that students will get. So hopefully students will start to understand why they were ranked in excellent or good or superior based on the feedback that they have. So 80% of that top is historical quality. All right, so it'll look at multiple perspectives, historical context, wide research, and then it has a place for specific technicals on your category. So if you're in the doc category, it's going to look at your audio visuals and rank based on that. And you can download a copy of all of them at nhd.org/evals. All right, so recently, and I mean very recently, we redid our teacher guide to the National History Day program, and you can actually buy a copy of this on our store online. And so if you would like a copy, it walks you through the different steps of the NHD program, and it does include graphic organizers and other affiliate materials. Actually, Connecticut State History is featured in there a couple of times, right, Rebecca? So if you'd like a copy, head on over.
I was just going to add to your shameless plug because I'm taking a class with National History Day and we're utilizing this, and friends, it's wonderful. It really has all these different worksheets. It's just a great resource. I would highly recommend it to you all.
Well, thank you, Rebecca. I'm glad to hear that. So you are one of our first classes to actually be using the new teacher guide. So please go ahead and check it out at nhd.org/by-making-history. All right. We also, last year, in anticipation of women's suffrage, did our Her Story workbook. And in this, it's 15 to 20-minute bell ringers on different women in U.S. history. It ranges from Anne Hutchinson all the way to Sally Ride. So you can download a copy completely for free at nhd.org/herstory. All right, now, World War I. I know most of you teach it. So we have a complete full lesson plan book that breaks down different aspects of World War I, everything from the start of the war to the Treaty of Versailles in 1919. And these are complete lesson plans, activity sheets, worksheets, graphic organizers that go with it. And they are written by NHD teachers for NHD teachers. So if you haven't checked this out yet, I highly recommend it. And you can download your copy complete with everything at nhd.org/WWI. All right. Just in case you missed it, one more time, right? Our virtual teacher bag is accessible at nhd.org/virtual teacher bag. All right, so this next one, we are in a partnership with the Library of Congress. And as part of that partnership with the Library of Congress, we are hosting webinars for teachers. It's part of a class. It is 4-webinar series class. So you will participate. It runs over a series of it. So you only do work once a month, and you can either watch a live or recorded webinar as part of that. So it is a little bit of a time commitment, but it's not a full-length class. But if you'd like to apply for this webinar series or learn more about it, head over to nhd.org/pd. You can learn about what the requirements are and what you'll learn in the class. This one focuses on how to get students to think about making historical arguments and how do you set up historical arguments. I highly recommend. We work with a professor who is fantastic on this, and also you will learn practical skills from our very own Lynn O'Hara, our director of programs here at National History Day. We ran this series last year, so you may have seen us advertising for it before. This will be our second run of it. So if you're interested, our application deadline is November 6th, and we are looking for scholarships. So it will be, if you get a scholarship, it is a completely free of charge class to you. So if that's something that might interest you, go ahead and check this out. All right, now's the time in the program. I know I've thrown a lot of stuff at you. Please feel free to ask me anything that won't get me fired. So anything within reason, I am here to answer any of those questions that you may have. So feel free to throw them in the chat if you have them. And it's okay if you don't. I know that was a lot to process.
I'm going to switch back to, if I can figure it out, to get our screen back so that we can perhaps see Ashley's lovely face here while she's answering questions. I'll stop share.
Allison asked a question about the contact information for the local historian board. Rebecca, I think you had mentioned something about that.
Yeah,
So,
I think I'm going to re-ask that question, Cindy, because we're getting a lot of interference with your volume. Yeah, Allison has asked, is there contact information for that local historians board? So the Association for the Study of Connecticut History. Cindy, if you want to maybe do a quick Google search, you can find them. But it's very easy to find. It's a great, actually, I say it's a great organization, then I follow up by saying, oh, I was on their board for 2 terms. But they do some really good work. They have a journal called Connecticut History Review, which is probably more for high schoolers because it's more of an academic focus. But Connecticut Explored is a great entry piece for students. Actually, I have my latest copy right here that I'm looking through, and it's great to read. I think as a magazine, it's a little bit easier and accessible, and they really focus on, or try to focus on, unknown stories. Oh, Cindy was asking, are we sharing slides from today? And we are going to share slides with folks and put them online as well. And it looks like from, oh, we've got some hi, nice to see you as well. It's good to see everyone here too. Does anyone have further questions for Ashley right now? It's great to have you with us, Ashley, since you actually worked on the theme book.
I did, and I can tell you I'm hard at work on 2022 right now.
Oh,
I can't
exciting.
give any more details than that. I know I've just a bunch of people's interest.
That's right. We don't want to get you in trouble.
No. Well, if no one has any questions, that's completely fine. But I will say you can email me if you think of anything. I'm happy to answer. And my email is pretty simple. It's just Ashley, ASHLEY @NHD.org. So if you have questions, feel free to reach out. I promise I don't bite. I'm very nice. Okay.
Oh, Sharon is asking, I saw some of the YouTube clips on Facebook this morning, but can't get back to them.
All right. That's okay, Sharon. Give me 1 second. Let me pull those up for you. So we have nicely, at least in my brain, hopefully organized or given some less chaos to YouTube, as it likes to do to us at times by throwing all the videos out at us at once. And we have put them in 2 playlists that will hopefully help you.
Thank you, Cindy, for putting the Association for the Study of Connecticut History in the chat box, which is great. They are a great resource, and you can reach out to them.
Tips on building an argument.
And we're gonna talk a little bit more though about when it's appropriate to do interviews. So that is something we're going to kind of clarify a little bit more in terms of not encouraging students to just call a historian and say, well, what's your argument, but to have students read their materials. Kevin Shirley is going to be joining us a little bit later from Georgia, and we're going to talk a little bit about that. But with ASH, they, in normal times, they do conferences, but they do, as I mentioned, have the Connecticut Historical Review, which you have to access through a database, but so many libraries, like the state library, has that access, and it's free for Connecticut residents. You can register online to do that. So it's really kind of a nice resource to do that. And they are academic articles, so they will have footnotes and all that good stuff. And actually, I wanted to give you a shout out because I was looking at your slides and all the great Connecticut topics, some of which I hadn't heard of, and I'm like, oh wow, I wish I'd known. But the thing that I also really liked is that in your citations, good examples, you had some really great resources that I hope people will take note of, you know, like the Connecticut Digital Archives, CHS. And, you know, you have to, with archives right now in Connecticut and with libraries, it really varies. So the best thing to do is call or email. But I know like my public library is it's still doing curbside pickup, but they're open. They'll let you in to come pick up books and then leave, and they're maintaining social distance and those things. But, you know, some museums are open, some archives are open, but a lot of places are trying to be accommodating. So reaching out to them is a really, really helpful thing to do. And I should also say as well that over the years, one of my favorite things is when I get a call from a colleague at a museum or an archive who's like, Rebecca, we had a History Day student, they came and did research. You know, that is really great. And they are very excited. The kids are interested. And it's also an opportunity for your students, because many times what has transpired is that historical society, once the project is done, will feature it on their website or feature it at a program. And, you know, someday we're going to be able to be together. And so that might be something that they would be interested in doing as well. And that gives the students another opportunity for recognition.
And I definitely encourage you to check out what your state has. Again, these are all examples from Connecticut, from their historical society, from the digital archive, which you'll learn a little bit more about later, but also from places like UConn or University of Connecticut's, right, local history archives. So see what your state has out there if you're not a CT native or if you're not teaching in Connecticut, and see what they have, because most likely you'll find the exact same thing in your state or in your state's universities. And so there's a lot of treasure troves in that local history that you can find, and it really puts a unique spin on an NHD project because it's coming from that local perspective.
And you're so right, Ashley, because, you know, any national story has a local application. So you talked a little bit about women who were involved in the suffrage movement here in Connecticut. You'll find that in any state. You know, you can always find that local story or take on it. You know, the civil rights movement didn't just happen in the South, it happened in the North. And what are those examples? So there are some really great resources.
Great. Well,
Right.
Sharon, hopefully I found you the videos that you were looking for. If I didn't, just send me an email and I will track down whatever it is you're looking for, I promise. But if no one else has any other questions, I won't keep you. So I'm going to turn it back over to Rebecca and see what she has planned for you next.
Great. Well, thank you. I'm going to actually, this is a new thing. I want to just ask, thank you, Ashley, for joining us today. We are so happy to have you with us and really appreciate you spending time with us to share this information.
Well, thanks, Rick. I'm glad to be here.
All righty. Well, I just started a poll. This is my first time doing this. I feel very technologically advanced right now, but we actually are just doing a quick poll. What are you most interested in learning today? And you can share with us your thoughts on that. You can answer multiple times. The results are coming in. Right now we have about 19 people who are with us today. And if you haven't already, please say hello to us in the chat. And we will be glad to hear where you're from, and if you have any questions as we go through the day. All right, so far it looks like it's almost a tie between new NHD rules and strategies for online teaching. They're neck and neck, everyone, with theme a little bit behind. So that's really helpful in understanding what folks are interested in as we're moving along. I see that Nicole has joined us. We're actually, this is a bit shocking. Usually we're always struggling to catch up, but we are actually moving a little ahead of schedule this morning. Nicole, are you ready to go? We'll wait a little bit for Nicole. We do have a question, and this doesn't have a name, but a phone number. If you want to change at some point, you just go to the three dots and you can change, rename yourself so we know your name to call out. But one of our colleagues has said, it seems that my students who do exhibits struggle with getting their point across with the 500 word limit. I've told them to add a timeline in a thesis statement. And analysis is also important. Any other tips? Well, I think you'll probably get some tips as we go through the day, but I'm going to I have some thoughts on it, but I would also invite our attendees, many of whom are it's Brian. Hi, Brian. Many who are very experienced teachers to jump in and add your thoughts as well to why some tips you would give. But, I actually am not a huge fan personally, and this is Rebecca's personal view, not the end all and be all from NHD. I'm not a huge fan of timelines unless they really are targeted and show the historical context. I've seen too many timelines that turn into biographies. This person's life, they were born, they got married, things that are not germane to the argument. So I would say the best advice I could really give is to be brutal in editing, because you really have to go through and really make sure that that you're really keeping it germane to the argument. So many projects that I've seen they include information that is all over the place and is interesting, but it's not germane to the argument. And I think that is the hardest thing to do. There are some really great exhibit examples. I would encourage students to look at past examples to understand what a really targeted argument is. And Brian, I understand that many judges do like timelines, and I'm not saying they're bad by any means. I've seen them used very effectively, but the point I'm trying to make is that if you use a timeline, it should be very targeted. It should not include, information that is like, when a person, oh, they went to school here and they got married there, and those things to just leave out, because I've seen a lot of them that include that. I remember a project a couple years ago, and I'm not going to get the topic exactly right, but it was on the development of bicycles, and I'm blanking right now on the name of the company in Connecticut that did that, but it was really neat because it was a timeline that talked about when bicycles were produced, and it really kind of kept it advanced the argument that was being made. And I think it's a very vague concept and not always easy to understand, but the real point is everything needs to be targeted and move you towards that point. As a judge, and I've judged at nationals many times, I've seen exhibits where I remember a few years ago that I judged, and the one that we chose to go on to the final round was actually the simplest project. It did not have a lot of bells and whistles, but it was arranged beautifully. I think subheadings are an awesome way of making a point very quickly. Background information, that a subheading can really help organize your program or your exhibit and explain to the judge what they're looking at and keep you on track. So I think those are really a couple of ways that can be helpful in helping your students with exhibits. And I would also say to keep in mind to be true to the type of project it is. By that, what I mean is an exhibit is meant to be visual. We were just doing, actually, with fellow coordinators, we were practicing with the new rules and evaluations forms, and we had to review a couple of projects. And one of them was an exhibit, and the pictures were like this tiny, and there were hardly any pictures. It was all text. And how did they get around that 500 words? Quotes. So I would really encourage students to be true to the medium. So with exhibits, it's visual. Have bigger pictures. Quotes are great and they can be very effective, but again, be mindful of using them. You know, I've judged exhibits where literally it's just full of quotes. We don't go to a museum to see a book on the wall. An exhibit is not a book. It should be a visual. So I hope that helps you a little bit.